Okay, so first let's take a look at the channel plugin. So straight away you can see there's the three different consoles right here. There's the spike, the mic, the niveau. All you have to do is just switch between either one of these, and all of these parameters here stay the same. It's just the internal differences between the consoles. That's what's changing, is the sound, the overall characteristic is going to change. So let me just demonstrate here. If I have it bypassed and the noise off and the mic on, that all stays the same. The drive stays the same. It just switches the characteristic. So what else do we have? The drive knob, which is one of the most important part. Even when you have the drive knob, the drive knob on 0, there's still some sort of stuff being introduced. So distortion, harmonics, all that kind of stuff. It's still going to affect the signal that you're running through this plugin. The more you crank the knob, the drive knob, the more it's introducing the distortion and harmonics and etc. And somewhere's around 7-ish, somewhere's in there, it actually starts to clip, and it gives you that clipping stuff. And if you really crank it, you get some crazy stuff happening. The next easiest knob is the output knob right here. You just turn it up or down. Very basic. Don't have to explain that. Let's skip this VCA group for a moment here. This noise button, when it's turned on, it has a little green button, or the little green light. That means that whatever the console, like the noise that it generates when it's just sitting there doing nothing, that is on and it's in the plugin. And when you turn it off, it gets rid of it. So Waves has kind of decoupled the noise from the rest of the plugin, so you can have it in or out, which is kind of neat. Then you have the bypass knob, which just bypasses the entire plugin right here as it is. So it gets rid of all the characteristics that the plugin is doing, and when you take it off, it's back to normal. It's on, just like doing bypass here in the DAW. The next button is the mic, which is basically just I think it's a 20 dB boost or something, but it's just pushing the input up however many decibels. That's just kind of like how actual consoles have. They have like a little button to give you some extra gain. Another semi but not really important button is this button here, which is when you have this plugin on stereo mode. You can select it as dual mono or stereo. So stereo is linked, meaning that both the left and the right channel are going to be processed in the exact same way, whereas unlinked or dual mono, the left and the right are going to be processed differently. I don't know how differently or what's different about it, but that's the idea behind it. And then over here you have this little VCA tab. So right here you can select which VCA group that this plugin is going to be associated with, either 1 through 8 or none. And to get to those VCA groups, which is these guys here, so this is the bus plugin, and you can see all the different groups here. To get to this little thing here quickly, if you don't have this bus thing opened, is just hit this little tab, and it's kind of a little shortcut right here that gives you quick access. And then you just hit the little tab again, and it goes right back to your plugin, the channel plugin that you're on, which is actually really handy. So when you're just cruising and tweaking and stuff, you just quickly hit that button, do whatever you have to, and then go back to your channel. It's pretty handy there. And next I'll just kind of explain this before I go into that little selector knob. So you have 8 different VCA groups. what the term is. The VCA stands for voltage controlled something. I can't remember. But essentially it's just an auxiliary or a group track, or what is that other? Yeah, whatever. It's just like a group track. So what you can do is for each of your, let's say, all of your drum tracks, I have kick, snare, tom, 3 toms, overhead hats, all this stuff here. I can assign all of these things to a group. So let's go to this VCA1, which I have already named drums. Let's put that as number 1. So now it's part of group 1, which is the drums group. Now I've already selected that for all of these drums, and I've already assigned all the other stuff. So like the bass, I've assigned to bass, guitar, I've assigned to guitar, etc., etc. So now what you can do is you can control globally from this little window here the noise, the global bypass, a kind of global drive button, an output volume, which is also global, and then you can select whether all of these plugins under this group are going to be a spike, a mic, or a niveau, or you can set them all individually. So this is kind of the most tricky part, but it's quite easy to wrap your mind around, is that let's say we wanted on my kick drum, I'm going here and on my kick, it sounds really good with a mic, and I'm driving it and it sounds good. And now I'm going out to my snare, but I don't really like the sound of the mic one, so I'm gonna try the spike. Doesn't work. Niveau works really good, and I drive it some more and it's perfect. In this instance, I would want to keep these things because they sound good. I've already tweaked them. So in the VCA stuff, I would want to keep this as individual, because then each of these individual plugins on this VCA group 1, I can have different consoles. And then that works fine. But if you wanted, you can have all of these drum groups assigned as a particular thing. So that you see when I switched it here, it switched the kick and the snare, and it's going to switch all the other ones as well that are in the drums VCA1 group. Switch it to a mic and all of them switch. Switch it to a niveau and all of them switch. So that's also really handy to just, it's kind of that another option that you can globally control one VCA group. Yeah, it's kind of just really handy to have. And the same kind of concept goes for the drive knob and the output knob, is that you can set it all individually, or if you kind of just don't want to bother with doing all that individual stuff, you just go into the VCA group and set it globally, and then you're good to go. So let's set that back to 0. So hopefully that explains it. And you can even just, you can group these however you want, name it however you want, etc., etc. I think that kind of explains itself. And just a last sort of note with this channel, what is different about it is that you can go in, like I said before, in each individual channel. So I have my kick drum, I'll put mic channel 1 on here. In my snare, I'll put mic channel 2, and these are going to sound different now. So that is the general fixings of the channel plugin. So now let's look at the bus plugin, and I'll kind of just explain why and when you would use the bus plugin. So in Cubase or in any other DAW, DAW, I have all of these audio tracks, and I'm going to be sending these to group channels in Cubase here, or in, like, let's say Pro Tools, an auxiliary channel. So I have my kick, I'm sending it to my kick groups track. Snare, same thing, but to a snare groups track. All of my toms are getting sent to my toms track. My overheads to the overheads, etc., etc. all these things are getting sent to a group track. And on all of the group tracks, I'm using my NLS bus. So this is where the bus comes in. So now I'm globally set up for drums right here. And I put on my bus plugin on the drums bus, as well as all this other stuff here. So that is set up in that way. And that's going to be determining how everything gets summed down. So I'll explain this a little bit later, is the preamp coloration and the analog summing. That is what this kind of stuff is being determined by, is when and where you're using the bus and the channel plugins. It's kind of just a little bit hard to explain, but now I'll just kind of go through the parameters on this guy here. So as before, you can have the individual, or you can have it set per VCA group. Now this bus plugin right here, this is on the drums, and because I have it set as mic for all the drums, this plugin itself, this bus plugin, is also set to a mic. But you can have it individually, where the actual drum bus plugin can be different from the plugins that are in your drum channels, if that makes sense. So right now, the consoles are decoupled. I can switch individually, but if I switch on here as the mic or the spike, all of them, including all the drums in here, including all my bus channels in here, which are all drums, and including my drums bus plugin, are all going to be the same. So if that's not a mouthful, then I don't know what. But yeah, and likewise you can set these bus plugins to be whatever VCA group you choose. So I'll try and explain that part. But firstly, again, you have the drive knob, you have the console switching, and you have the trim. So instead of a one of these here, instead of a fader, it's a knob, so it's a trim. And you also have the noise and the bypass. So watch here, because it's on VCA 1, these are coupled. All of the drums are coupled, and the bypass as well. But now, I have all of these channels set to drums. I have all of these group channel / bus plugins set to group 1. And then I have the drums set to group 1. And that's how all of these drum channels up here, and all of the group tracks and the drum track is all grouped. It's because I've assigned all of them to number 1. Okay, so hopefully that explains it. If not, maybe just leave a comment in the comment section, because it's hard to kind of just explain all this stuff, but it might be easier if you have a question and I just answer the question. Yeah. So what's next here? I think that is it. Yeah. So as far as the parameters and stuff. So next I'll kind of describe what Waves was saying, and actually I'll pull up the manual because they explain it really well in the manual. It's this little section right here. So session setup here. There's 2 different ways to use the plugin, and I'll leave this open so you can read it as well if you wanted to read it instead of hear me say it. So analog consoles, I'll kind of sort of skim and read here. They do a certain thing that, well, any analog gear does, but for consoles you have preamp coloration, and you also have analog summing. So when all the channels are coming down to the mix bus, there's analog summing characteristics going on there. So the first way, which is the virtual summing console or analog summing, is you would put the NLS channel inserted on the last insert of the DAW audio tracks. So that's what we have set up right now. So all of these audio tracks, we're setting the channel plugin on the last insert of each of these plugins here. And then you would route the NLS bus on the first insert of the master track and any other bus track as well. So in this case, I have the 2 bus or the master bus right here. The NLS bus is on the first track. And for all of these group tracks on the first, right here, the NLS bus on the first insert. So you can see they're all set up first. And let's see what it says here. Just as the stereo return would be routed from the analog console back to the DAW. So yeah, that's how it's kind of mimicking the summing, is it's because it's taking the signal, the last chained part here, it's taking that signal and it's sending it to VCA group 1, which is all of these here, and it's doing whatever analog characteristics and putting it in audio form or whatever, and then it's coloring it and being sent into the first insert here. So it's like a chain effect. It's kind of hard to explain, but I think you might get what I'm trying to get at. So that's the first way. And now the second way here is to simulate console preamp coloration. So it's not anything to do with the summing, it's just a preamp coloration. And what you would be doing is putting this plugin, the channel plugin, on the first insert. Let's go back here. So the NLS channel is placed on the first insert of the DAW audio tracks, and then the NLS bus can be inserted at any other point. So if you're just going for preamp coloration, make sure the channel is on the first insert, and any of the bus and the master bus plugin can be anywhere. It doesn't matter, because it's not trying to do the analog summing or whatever. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Sorry if that's kind of a poor explanation, but maybe I'll just dive down a little bit into what summing is, because that's a little bit relevant, and as well as the preamp coloration. First, I'll start with preamp coloration because it's a little bit easier to explain. So when you have preamps, the more you drive it, because it's like a tube or a transistor or whatever solid state, whatever it is, it's introducing harmonics, it's doing things to transients, it's either accenting them or rolling them or that kind of stuff. It may even introduce a little bit of compression. It'll probably tweak the EQ a little bit. It might affect the stereo field in the same way. So that's what this thing would be mimicking there, is just that kind of stuff. Now summing is when you take multiple channels and you're taking those channels and going to a smaller amount of channels. The most typical case is when you have a large number, let's say 16 tracks of audio, and summing them down to a 2-channel stereo track. You are summing 16 tracks to 2 tracks. And going from that to 2 tracks, there has to be summing going on. So it's calculations and what have you. On the DAW, when you would be doing internal summing, the computer is taking bits of information because all of the audio in the computer is just bits. It's a bunch of bits. And it's going to calculate all of those bits together at any given point, and it's just going to spit out a number, and that's going to be your stereo bus, your mix bus summed audio. It's just going to be bits of information, 16 channels of bits of information, calculated down to 2 channels of bits of information. But in the analog world, it's actually taking like waveforms in a kind of electrical circuit and adding all those things together and doing stuff. But it's doing it in the analog world, so it's a little bit different. And how I explained that each different channel does like something different. The summing, in this case, when you're setting it up for summing, it's going to be introducing different characteristics, and then it's going to add more than just what your DAW would be summing. And in this case, mimicking analog summing. So hopefully that hopefully that kind of gives you an explanation. Like I was saying before, if you have any questions, just leave a comment in the or leave a question in the comments windows below, because sometimes my explanations go on a tangent and whatnot, and it's sometimes easier to just answer a question that you write and I answer. So yeah, so the next video we're going to take a look at the actual sounds, and I'll give a kind of review and just kind of demonstrate how I actually use the plugin. So stay tuned for that.